All right. Looks like we've got another great stack of AI news here. We're going to dive into the latest developments from Runway, NVIDIA, and Anthropic. Oh, and there's some interesting research on how LLMs actually do math.
Yeah, should be fun. Let's get right into it. First up, Runway has released Frames, their new image generation model.
So what's special about frames? It seems to be all about controlling the artistic style of the generated image.
Right, so with Frames, instead of just, generating any image, you can specifically go for styles like vintage film or retro anime, even things like cinematic portraits.
Interesting.
And they're doing that with these numbered world presets. Each one has specific aesthetics. At launch, there are 10 distinct worlds, but they say more are coming. And it's all available through their Gen 3 alpha platform and also the Runway API.
So they're really trying to become like a one-stop shop for all your AI visuals.
Exactly. Especially when you think about how they're combining image and video generation, all while keeping things safe and above board with their content moderation procedures.
That's really smart of them. All right, so moving on to NVIDIA. They've just unveiled Fugato. It's their new text-to-audio AI model.
Yes.
And this one looks really interesting. You can generate a whole range of audio, like speech or music. They even claim to be beating out more specialized models on benchmarks like Libra's speech.
Yeah.
How are they pulling that off?
Well, Fugato is built on 2.5 billion parameters. And get this, it's trained on a massive 20 million rows of data. That's basically 3 million hours of audio. Plus, they're using a technology called composable art, which blends different audio attributes, tasks, and even different models. You can almost think of it like a mixing board for AI audio.
Interesting.
And for the best performance, they're using a technique called optimal transport conditional flow matching during training.
Okay, so I have to ask, does that mean that, like, in theory, you could tell Fugato to generate like a Morgan Freeman voice singing, say, a heavy metal song?
Precisely. That's exactly the idea. But there's a catch.
I figured there might be. What's the catch?
Well, NVIDIA is holding back on a public release for now. They've got some ethical concerns.
Yeah, that makes sense. What are they worried about?
Mainly misuse, think voice cloning, deepfakes, that sort of thing.
Right. Yeah, I can see how that could be an issue. It's still pretty amazing, though. Fugato sounds like it could totally revolutionize audio content creation, assuming, of course, it's used responsibly.
For sure. And speaking of responsible development, let's move on to Anthropic. They've got this new model context protocol.
Oh, right. MCP.
Yeah, they're trying to simplify how AI models can access data.
This is a big one. As ML engineers, we know connecting AI models to different data sources can be a real pain. You're often stuck building custom connectors. It's a major bottleneck for deployment.
And MCP is all about removing those bottlenecks. They want to make an open source standard for connecting AI models straight to the data sources, no more custom connectors. They want to simplify enterprise AI deployment.
Okay, but how exactly does that work?
Well, there are 3 key components to MCP. A protocol specification with SDKs, then there's local server support in Claude Desktop. Oh, and then they have this open source repository of pre-built servers.
So they already have a lot of the integrations people would need.
Exactly. These pre-built servers can already hook up with Google Drive, Slack, GitHub, even Git, plus Postgres and Puppeteer. It can even handle both local resources and remote APIs.
Oh, wow. That's pretty impressive. So it sounds like they're going all out to gain some widespread adoption.
Yeah. And it seems to be working. They've got some early adopters like Block and Apollo, and even dev tool companies like Zed and Replit are working on implementing MCP, even Codium and SourceGraph.
Okay, so potentially, are we looking at a future where connecting an AI model to your data is going to be as easy as, I don't know, plugging in a USB drive?
That's exactly the vision. Okay, so last but not least, let's move on to some interesting stuff happening in open source, specifically LTX Video, a new real-time video generator.
This is huge. Real-time video generation has always been a major challenge.
It has, but Lightricks seem to have really figured things out with this one. They can generate 5 seconds of video in just 4 seconds, running on something like an RTX 4090, so just a consumer-grade GPU.
Wow, that's crazy fast. So what's the tech behind this?
So LTX Video is using a diffusion transformer architecture. It's got 2 billion parameters, and it supports both text-to-video and image, plus text-to-video generation.
So you can give it a script or an image and a caption.
Yeah.
And it just whips up a video.
Exactly. Plus, it's available on Hugging Face, Fowl.ai, and Comfy UI. And the best part, it's free. for both personal and commercial use.
Wow. So this is a massive step forward in making video synthesis tech accessible to everyone.
I think so. It'll be interesting to see what developers do with this.
For sure. Okay, so last up, we've got this really interesting research on how LLMs actually solve math problems.
Yes.
I have to admit, I was totally under the impression that LLMs were using traditional algorithms.
Nope. New research has actually found that they're using pattern matching instead. And get this, they only need a tiny fraction of their neurons to do it. Like just 1.5%.
Wait, hold on. So you're telling me these massive neural networks are only using about 1.5% of their brain power to crunch numbers?
Yeah. Researchers have found a specialized circuit in LLMs that handles the calculations. It only uses about 200 neurons per layer, plus some attention heads. The rest, about 91% of the neurons, are dedicated to implementing something called heuristics.
Heuristics? What are those?
Basically, they're like simple pattern matching rules.
Oh, I see. So they're not really understanding the math the way we do. They're just recognizing patterns, and then they apply a set of rules based on what they see.
Right. When researchers disable those heuristics, the model's accuracy drops by a crazy 29%. So it seems heuristics play a pretty big role in mathematical reasoning.
Huh. That's fascinating. It really makes you think differently about how these models actually work.
It does, and it raises some interesting questions about their ability to generalize. If they're basically learning shortcuts, how will they perform on tasks that are, outside their training data?
That is the million-dollar question.
For sure. The more we learn about these models, the more we realize how much we still don't understand.
That's so true.
I think it's worth circling back to Runway's frames for a second, especially when we think about its potential impact for ML engineers like ourselves.
Yeah, on the surface, it just seems like another image generator.
Right, but there's something a bit more nuanced going on here.
What do you mean?
Well, Frames is a really good example of this growing trend towards specialization in AI models. Instead of trying to be a generalist, a jack of all trades, it's focusing on doing one thing really well.
You mean like artistic style control?
Exactly. And that approach can be really valuable for ML engineers too. Sometimes building a model that's super good at one specific task is way more valuable than trying to create a general purpose model.
It's about choosing the right tool for the job, I guess.
Exactly. It's like having a well-stocked toolbox ready for anything.
So NVIDIA's decision to hold back on the public release of Fugato because of ethical concerns, that's a pretty big deal.
It is.
I mean, it really shows they're taking the potential risks of this technology seriously.
For sure. And it brings up a really important question for all of us who work in this field. What responsibility do we have when it comes to AI safety?
Yeah.
It's not enough to just have the ability to build something. We have to think carefully about whether we should actually, release it.
I've always liked that Spider-Man quote. With great power comes great responsibility.
Exactly. We need to be aware of the potential consequences and, actually build in safeguards so it can't be misused.
And it's not even just about preventing misuse, like intentional misuse.
Yeah.
We also have to think about unintended consequences, like bias, for example.
Absolutely. AI models are only as good as the data they're trained on. So if your training data is biased, then your model is going to inherit those biases. And that can have some, serious consequences, especially in fields like healthcare or criminal justice.
Okay, so that brings us to Anthropic's MCP. And it's not just about making life easier for developers, is it? It's also about building a more secure and transparent system for AI models to access data.
Yeah, that's a really important point. Standardizing data access, like what MCP is trying to do, has the potential to lower a lot of the risks associated with AI, things like data breaches and unauthorized access.
So MCP could help prevent that.
Yeah, because it basically creates this controlled environment for data interaction.
It's like a secure pipeline specifically for data.
Exactly. And a standardized protocol like this can also make it easier to audit and monitor AI systems, right? So we can make sure they're being used responsibly and ethically.
So MCP can benefit both developers and end users.
I think so. Of course, with any new tech, there are always challenges and potential pitfalls. But MCP seems like a really positive step.
Okay, so let's talk about LTX video for a minute. This is a game changer, right?
Yeah.
It'll be really interesting to see how it gets used, not just in entertainment, but in things like education or healthcare.
For sure. Imagine being able to instantly create these personalized educational videos or even generate realistic simulations for medical training.
Oh, wow, yeah. Possibilities are pretty amazing.
Yeah.
It's almost like we have a video equivalent of an LLM now, where you just, give it a text prompt or an image, and it generates a video.
And that's where things get really interesting. I mean, if we think back to that research we were talking about on LLMs and their bag of heuristics, it makes you wonder what kind of heuristics are being used for video generation.
Yeah, I mean, are these models actually understanding the visual concepts they're depicting? Or are they just, like, really, really good at pattern matching?
That's a great question. A question for the researchers, I guess. But it really drives home an important point. Even though these models can create this incredible realistic output, the way they work internally is still totally different from how humans think.
Right. And that's something really important to keep in mind as we go forward developing and deploying these AI systems. We need to be aware of their limitations.
Totally.
And we need to make sure we're using them responsibly.
For sure.
Okay, so switching gears a bit, let's think about what this research on LLMs and math means for the future of AI. This bag of heuristics approach, it's really efficient.
It is.
But it also brings up some concerns about generalizability. I mean, if LLMs are mostly just learning shortcuts, how well will they be able to handle new situations? Solve problems that they haven't specifically seen during their training.
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? But maybe by really understanding these heuristics, we can actually refine them or even teach LLMs to, develop new ones. And that could lead to more robust and adaptable AI.
So instead of forcing LLMs to think like humans, maybe the key is to, embrace their own way of thinking.
Exactly.
That's really interesting.
It is, and it really highlights the need for collaboration between different fields. Computer scientists, mathematicians, cognitive scientists, and ethicists all need to work together if we're going to ensure responsible AI development.
AI that benefits humanity.
Right, exactly.
So, wow, we have covered a lot of ground today. We've seen these new tools for image and video generation, a potential breakthrough in audio AI, a movement towards standardized data access, and a fascinating look into how LLMs do math.
We have.
And through it all, this need for responsible AI development keeps coming up. As developers, we really have a responsibility to think ahead and anticipate the potential consequences of what we create.
Yeah, and we need to make sure we're putting safeguards in place.
We need to be aware of potential bias. We need to be transparent, and ultimately, we need to make sure that these really powerful tools are being used for good. It really feels like we're at this, turning point in the evolution of AI.
I agree. The technology is advancing so quickly, but we're still trying to figure out how AI really works,
It can be a little unsettling, all this power,
Yeah.
but we don't fully understand it.
It can be. But it's also what makes this whole field so exciting. There's so much we don't know, so much left to discover.
It's like we're these pioneers,
Yeah.
heading out into uncharted territory.
Exactly. And as pioneers, we need to be ready for anything, be adaptable, open to new ideas, and be willing to, challenge our assumptions.
So what does all this mean for our listeners, the ML and software engineers who are dealing with all these crazy advancements?
Well, I think the big takeaway is this. Don't be afraid to experiment, to really push the boundaries, but always do it responsibly. Stay up to date with the latest developments, but also take time to understand the core principles.
So it's not just about building cool tech. It's about building tech that actually, helps people.
Right. It has to be a holistic approach, one that considers the technical side, but also the ethical, social, and economic impacts.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm left with one final kind of thought-provoking question.
I'm listening.
We've talked about AI safety and bias and the whole idea of responsible development. But what if the key to truly robust AI is actually embracing those human-like shortcuts, those heuristics? What if, instead of trying to get rid of them, we learn to understand them, even refine them?
That's an interesting thought. Maybe if we study how these models develop and use heuristics, we can really understand their strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah.
And that could lead to more effective and trustworthy AI.
That would be a huge shift in how we think about AI, wouldn't it?
It would. But sometimes the biggest breakthroughs come from questioning the way we've always done things,
It definitely gives us all a lot to think about.
It does, and that's what the deep dive is all about. Until next time.